So my name is Bryn Coldrick. I work for a company called Archaeological Management Solutions. My co-speaker this evening is Tom Cassidy, who's the former Architectural Conservation Officer for Limerick City and County Council. And like Tom, I grew up in the Boyne Valley between Navan and Slane, County Meath. And we have a load of pillboxes along there as well. And as my secondary school compatriot Tommy Tiernan once said, that they were to keep the Navan bloodlines pure, to keep all the Slane people out, you know. So enigmatic structures, I suppose, as well. I mean, one of the things that I used to think, you know, looking at these pillboxes is, do we really expect that we're going to be able to withstand the might of the German army with these tiny little concrete pillboxes? So what we're here to talk about tonight, I suppose, you know, is an aspect of the built heritage that is often overlooked, misunderstood, and maybe underappreciated. They're small structures, but they have a big story to tell, and that's what we're here tonight to do. And this work has emanated from the Foynes to Limerick Road project and the Adair bypass, which I'm sure you're all aware of. I need to obviously give a shout out to the project funders, Limerick City and County Council being our client, sponsored by TII and the Department of Transport. But obviously I also need to thank Clare Museum and Clare County Council for inviting us here to speak this evening. So I think this is the fourth or fifth version of this talk that Tom and I have given over the last year. So we did the first one in Ballysteen around this time last year, and we introduced ourselves as a double act, and since then we've become a road show. So, look, it's great to be here, and so let's get into it. So this is what we're going to cover this evening. So I'll give a brief introduction on what pillboxes are. I'll talk about the project that we're working on, and we're here tonight to talk about a cluster of pillboxes extending west from Askeaton in County Limerick on the other side of the estuary. I'll talk about the archaeological and built heritage surveys that we've been doing, the historical research and some of the findings that have been coming out of that, the awareness raising and the public outreach that tonight's event is part of. I'm going to hand over to Tom then, who was actually at the time that we met on this project was doing independent research on pillboxes and emergency era defences. So we're very fortunate to have found each other, I guess, you know. So Tom is going to talk about the wider context, the global context, European, and then bringing it back then to look at pillboxes in other parts of the country, and then focusing then on what Tom is starting to refer to, or is referring to as the Askeaton type of pillboxes. And then finally, I'll wrap up with some conclusions and just some observations, just in terms of, based on the work that we've been doing, in terms of what we think, or why we think pillboxes are significant, and some of the future work that we're going to be doing. Excuse me. You will occasionally see this symbol, the no photograph symbol. That's just a respectful request not to photograph certain slides, because certain slides will be images from published books, and although we have permission from the publisher to use them in the presentation, they have requested that we don't photograph those particular slides. So if you do see that symbol, please respect that. Thank you. So what are pillboxes? Well, a pillbox is a small structure made from reinforced concrete with openings, often referred to as embrasures or gun loops, that can be used to fire rifles or light machine guns through, while giving protection, some protection at least, to the soldiers inside. So the first pillboxes that we, as we can think of them, were built by the Russians during their war with Japan in 1904-05, and then the Germans took up the idea on the Western Front in 1916. The idea was then taken up by the British to protect their coastline against the threat of invasion during the First World War. And then during the Second World War, over 18,000 pillboxes were constructed across Britain and Ireland between 1940 and 1943, when the threat of invasion finally subsided. Why are they called pillboxes? Well, we don't know exactly, but there's a couple of theories. One is because of their design. Pillboxes, particularly the round type that you see here in the top image, reminded people of the little containers that we used to store pills. So that kind of refers mostly to the circular versions. Another theory is that the term pillbox is short for pillar box, again reminding people of pillar post boxes. And again, the square version kind of looks a bit more like that, but we don't really know for sure. Pillboxes, casemates, blockhouses, these sorts of structures are all part of a tradition dating back to ancient times, and as Tom will be showing us in a moment, are found all over the world in different forms. So pillboxes are a type of blockhouse, as John pointed out. Similar structures that we can think of when we're thinking of blockhouses, used as protective lookouts to watch for enemy movements at strategic locations such as harbours, river crossings, so lookout posts that you might have come across. Obviously in Ireland, most of us would be familiar with Martello towers built during the Napoleonic Wars, the watchtowers around the coastline and on the River Shannon. I currently live in Banagher, and we have the only two inland Martello towers in Ireland. I can tell from the bias in the pictures that I now live in East Galway. So tower houses, like the one shown here, Brackleen Castle, again, another type of blockhouse. And this is an observation that Mike Osborne in his book Pillboxes of Britain and Ireland made. He also Osborne now referred to two examples of post-medieval freestanding gun towers in Ireland, one at Youghal, another at Reginald's Tower in Waterford, and in my own sort of backyard now in West Offaly, there's a late medieval gun turret at the Sir Kieran monastic site. So these tower houses, blockhouses, Martello towers, they're all in this tradition of surrounding yourself with stone, or in the case of the pillboxes, concrete, in order to give yourself protection from attack. So in Ireland, between April 1940 and April 1941, during what was called the emergency, as John has pointed out, everywhere else in the world we knew it as the Second World War, World War II, around 300 pillboxes were built around Ireland. And concentrations can be found in places of high strategic value, such as the Curragh, the Boyne Valley, and as we'll see, the Shannon Estuary. So that just gives you a very quick introduction to pillboxes, what they are. So we're going to just look quickly now at the Foynes to Limerick Road project and the Adair bypass, which is the project that we're currently working on. So this project has been undertaken by Limerick City and County Council with the support of TRI. It's designed to improve connectivity between Foynes Port, Limerick and the surrounding areas, and address the heavy traffic, obviously, through the village of Adair. And the Adair bypass component of that project has been prioritised in preparation for the Ryder Cup next year. But over the past 2 years, AMS has been carrying out archaeological excavations throughout the footprint of the scheme. In total, around 150 archaeological sites were discovered. Most of these have now been fully excavated and recorded in advance of construction. But the other thing that we've been doing is providing a range of other services, including built heritage surveys, and the pillboxes are prominent in that work. And it's been really fantastic and rare opportunity to engage with these pillbox structures. I'm sure most of you here will be very familiar with the project, but if you do want to find out more, you can visit the project website, foyneslimerick.ie. And you can also follow AMS's social media channels and YouTube channels, where we've got lots of videos on the archaeology and heritage works that we've been doing. So the focus of our research is a line of World War II or emergency era pillboxes, which extends roughly from Askeaton in County Limerick, about 5 kilometres west, looking out across or towards the Shannon Estuary to the north and Foynes to the northwest, which we've been calling the Askeaton Cluster or the Askeaton Group. Now, 9 of these pillboxes were already listed in the Record of Protected Structures for Limerick, mainly thanks to the efforts of Tom here. 8 were recorded by our colleagues at IAC and the TRI project archaeologist, Paul O'Keefe, who I should give a shout out to, during the research and field walking for the EIA. 1 was discovered during site works when the hedges were being cleared back from the road. It was buried in the hedgerow and was revealed during road clearance. And then through the engagement that we've been doing over the last year with the local community, the public outreach, another 10 pillboxes or sites of pillboxes have been reported. Now, several of these, I have to give another shout out now, several of these were independently identified by a local man called Mike McCarthy, who was using thermal imaging, which he would normally use to actually do search and rescue. But he used the thermal imaging techniques to actually identify pillboxes. And those locations were then verified by drone. And subsequently, Tom and Paul and the landowners have gone and confirmed those locations. So it's been a great example of what you might call citizen science. All this. So that brings the total that we currently know about in the Askeaton area to 28. So we had 24 upstanding structures and the locations of 4 that were previously demolished. 1 of them was relocated. Now, as we'll see in a moment, based on the historical research, we think around 35 pillboxes were built in this area in 1940, 1941. So we're well on our way to having the full set. To put that in context, the National Inventory of Architectural Heritage records less than 20 pillboxes nationally. It records none of the Askeaton cluster, and in fact only one is recorded in the whole of Connacht. Some of the NIH entries are group listings. For example, the pillbox listed at Old Bridge in the Boyne Valley represents one of a group of approximately 20. However, based on photographs of some of the other listings, such as those at Bearhaven, some of these reputed pillboxes might actually be better classed as lookout posts rather than pillboxes per se. But the point to make here is that pillboxes are vastly under-recorded across the country, which is why the research that we've been doing on the pillboxes and engagement with the local community around Askeaton is so important. It would be unfair to say, though, the pillboxes have been completely ignored, of course. For example, Geraldine Stout and Munich O'Reilly recorded and published research on the pillboxes of the Boyne Valley. This was originally published in the Journal of the Old Drogheda Society in 2000 and updated in Geraldine's book on Newgrange and the Bend of the Boyne in 2002. I've already mentioned Mike Osborne's book on the pillboxes of Britain and Ireland. So he covers Irish pillboxes and other defences that we've been talking about. I made that observation about them being part of this wider tradition of blockhouses. He makes no mention, though, of the Askeaton pillboxes. And although he gives plans for various pillbox types used by the British, none of the Askeaton examples appear to fit neatly into the typology that he outlines. And Tom will be returning to this point later. Excuse me. So in terms of the work we've been doing built heritage surveys, obviously. Once they've been cleaned back, there are 4 in the footprint, by the way, of the road scheme. 2 of those have to be relocated to a place to be determined out of the way and safely put somewhere else. And then 2 of them, although they're not being directly impacted, they're being what they call subjected to setting effects due to the proximity of the road. So we're recording those as well. So far we're recording 4 in detail, but we have received funding now to actually do high-level recording on all 28, which is fantastic. The 24, and then we know about the 4 other locations. So built heritage surveys involve measuring, mapping, photographing, producing scale plans and elevations, which I'll show you next. We're also looking at the thickness of the walls to try and understand if these pillboxes were designed to withstand artillery fire or machine guns. Now, pretty sure that these are designed to withstand machine guns, small arms fire. The walls are around 23 centimeters thick, so they wouldn't withstand a direct hit from a high explosive shell. As you can see from the bottom right image, there is evidence of what they call planking. So basically, wooden molds were made, and then the concrete was poured into those molds. And the lines that you see here are basically, the sort of the imprint, the impression of the wooden planking. And some of the pillboxes actually have the original timbers still in position. These are the kinds of drawings that my colleague Sarah Marandola at AMS has been producing. So we're doing plans, elevations, photographs from each of the embrasures or the openings, so you can see exactly what the view is from each one, a series of photographs from each of the elevations, and then accurately plotting them on maps and aerial photographs. Another important thing that we're doing is what's called view shed analysis. So we're trying to determine and map the theoretical views and field of fire from each of the structure's opening and the intervisibility between the pillboxes. So what you see on screen here are computer-generated, GIS-generated viewshed models. The top image there in the orange, that shows the theoretical reach for a Vickers machine gun based on a range of 4,500 yards, while the grey shading in the lower image shows the theoretical rifle range of 600 yards. You can also see the intervisibility zones with 2 other pillboxes on the west of BH26, which is what this image here refers to. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to better understand how these pillboxes worked as a network. They weren't designed to be used or operate or be effective in isolation. They were designed to work as a network. And that's what we're trying to understand through the research that we're doing. We've also done test excavations. Obviously, as archaeologists, this is the kind of thing that we do. So once they were cleaned back and recorded, we excavated around the base to try and better understand the construction methods. As you can see, and as you would expect, they're on a very solid concrete foundation here, which is about 20 centimeters thick. So they're sturdy structures, again, wouldn't withstand a direct hit from the shell fire, but they're still pretty sturdy structures. And that obviously helps with their long-term preservation. Obviously, there are issues sort of in coastal areas and areas such as riverbanks where these structures would be vulnerable. But we're fortunate with the Askeaton ones that most of them are they're well preserved, and hopefully they will remain so for a long time to come. In terms of the historical research that Tom has been conducting, and myself as well, we've been looking at documents in the military archives at Cattleborough Barracks. Tom has been to the Vickers Machine Gun Association over in England, as well as the Royal Engineers Museum and the National Archives in Kew. And Tom will be talking about some of his findings from that research shortly. So we're trying to understand things like the distribution of these pillboxes. Why are they in this area? And I'll go through some of the reasons why now in a moment. We're trying to compare contemporary mapping, which I'll show you, with the reality on the ground. We're looking at the designs, as I mentioned. Are these UK variants? Are they native Irish variants? What are they? And obviously, we're also trying to understand the wider historical context of the emergency and the whole question of Irish neutrality. I've been spending quite a lot of time perusing the newspapers online, which have been highlighting several themes, including how pillboxes were a fundamental element of the preparations of defences, not just here, of course, or in Britain, but across Europe, on North Africa and the Pacific theatres of war. These are an essential part of the defences, pretty much all over the place. We're trying to understand, and this is something that the newspapers are highlighting, how they were designed to work as that system, not in isolation, but as a network. Tactics in terms of opposing objectives, of attacking pillbox positions and using them as active defences. The newspapers also have information on makeshift and disguised pillboxes, some of which could be highly imaginative. For example, some pillboxes were disguised as barns, but this is in the UK now, barns, bush shelters, even gypsy caravans complete with scarecrow families gathered around them. So if you're the Luftwaffe, you're flying over, you think that this is just like a typical sort of rural scene, but you don't realize is that it's packed full of soldiers. There are also mobile pillboxes on the back of lorries, and we have a photograph of that to show you later. So far I've read over 100 newspaper articles, but as with any online research based on keywords, you do get a lot of false hits. So the fashionable ladies back in the 1940s and earlier were wearing these hats there on the left called the pillbox hat. And then during the Boer War, officers of the Grenadier Guards wore a distinctive cap known as the pillbox. And there's lots of articles sort of popping up about all these. But so far the richest source of information has been the military archives of Cattleborough Barracks and Rathmines, in particular the Emergency Defence Planning or EDP files. And these include plans that were drawn up by the General Staff in 1940 to counter a possible German attack, and there were separate plans, which I didn't realise, to counter a possible Allied attack, as well as operational orders that were issued to the various army commands across the country. So in case of invasion by the Axis group, in other words the Germans, Plan A was to be implemented. And this plan was based on the premise that, and I quote here, German attacks may be made by sea and airborne troops to secure ports such as Cork or the Shannon Estuary. The general mission of the defence forces in this scenario is to attack the enemy in the greatest possible strength when and where he is attempting to invade our territory with the object of destroying him. So army planners determined that German attacks were likely to take two forms. Aerial attack, that is bombing, including gas bombardment and machine gunning, accompanied or closely followed by the landing of parachutists and airborne troops, which is what happened in Crete. And or ground attack. This may take the form of efforts to surprise and seize isolated posts by bodies of fifth columnists, that is the IRA, parachutists or both, or by sea landing parties. So in either of these events, important public installations and buildings, transport centres, communications were all to be protected. This included bridges, roads, railways, petrol supplies, electricity stations, communications, and so on. And except when military guards were specified, for example in Athlone, and the duty of protecting these installations fell to the local defence force or the LDF, which is made up of volunteers who were given basic training and equipment, people like Willie Hourigan of Askeaton, who's pictured here. Orders were also given to set up what was known as demolition belts within certain areas that would be designed to blow up bridges and other installations that could potentially be used by an invading enemy, and also to obstruct roads and railways to impede an enemy advance. So one of the most useful finds to date in the research was this annotated Ordnance Survey map from 1941, which Tom has called the measles map, for obvious reasons, which shows around 65 numbered blockhouses, in other words, pillboxes, around the mouth of the Shannon, with the biggest concentration, which you can see at the bottom of the screen, being our cluster around Askeaton. The other clusters that you can see here are Rhinanna, now Shannon Airport, Limerick City, Ardnacrusha and Partine, and obviously up here in Ennis. There's 4 of them marked in Ennis, and maybe after we've finished, people might let us know if they know of any around the town. The idea being that obviously things like Ardnacrusha, Shannon Airport, Rhinanna Airfield as it was then, key infrastructure that needed to be protected in the event of an invasion. And then the population centres of Limerick and Ennis, the army and the volunteers and army would then use those as fallback positions if they were being sort of put under a lot of pressure from the invading forces. You would fall back to those urban centres to protect the local populations. There was also a fort, as I'm sure many people know, called Fort Shannon, built at Ardnamore Point, County Kerry in 1942. So these are the sorts of defensive structures that were put in place in the event that we were invaded by the Germans. So in September 1940, senior army planners from General Headquarters and regional commands carried out a reconnaissance drive on both sides of the Shannon in the general vicinity of Limerick, and Askeaton was visited as part of this tour. And it found itself at the junction of 3 defensive lines. L1, which extended from Limerick to Askeaton, L2, which went from Askeaton to Foynes, and L3, which went southwest from Askeaton down to Ardagh. And that evening, the officers retired to a hotel in Limerick, where they discussed a number of issues, including having the local security force, which was later amalgamated into the local defence force, assist in the preparation of emplacements, which we read as meaning pillboxes. And we think that this map is associated with them, that reconnaissance and those decisions that were made. So no matter where they are in the country, pillboxes are generally cited to protect strategic positions such as roads, bridges, ridge crossings, and important buildings or facilities, as I was saying. But they could also be grouped to form a deep line of defence overlooking important strategic locations, in our case the Shannon Estuary, with a network of individual pillboxes providing covering fire to one another, which we think is the case with the Askeaton group. So as I noted there, Askeaton was the meeting point of 3 defensive lines that the army had identified, and it would appear that the cluster at Askeaton was designed to disrupt a German advance, either moving south from the estuary or moving north from Cork and then on to Dublin. So Askeaton would have formed what was known as a pivot point around which a defence might be concentrated and an enemy advance disrupted. As you can see, and one of the first things that my 14-year-old pointed out as soon as he saw this on my screen was, there's a railway line going right through the middle of it. You know, this is the railway line from Foynesport to Askeaton, or to Rathkeil. It's the cluster of pillboxes is also protecting the local road network, as you can see. All of this infrastructure was absolutely critical, because if there was an invading force, the mission was that the local defence volunteers would hold the line for as long as possible until the regular army was able to come in and provide reinforcements and take over the defence. So it was absolutely critical to keep the rail lines and the roads open to allow that to happen. Okay, so this aerial photograph shows the concentrations of pillboxes around the mouth of the Shannon based on the measles map. Again, just highlighting the areas that I've already pointed out. So by mid-1943, the threat of invasion had reduced, but as the officer commanding Western Command, Colonel Felix McCrory, noted on the 31st of July 43, and I quote, "While the situation continued, there was always the possibility that this country may be invaded. And so the pillboxes of Askeaton and the men of the LDF, they stood ready to defend their country. Thankfully, these never saw action, they were never tested, because history would have been quite different if we had been invaded, I'm sure." Now, Tom will provide further discussion of the pillboxes in an Irish and global context shortly, but hopefully that's given you a flavour of the research that we've been doing on Askeaton so far. But just as important as all that documentary research and surveys has been the community engagement, the awareness raising and the public outreach. So we've been doing a whole range of things. One of the first things we did, and it's actually how we met Tom, was we did a video on the pillboxes called The Forgotten Defenders, Pillboxes of the Shannon Estuary, the same obviously as tonight's talk. And that's available on YouTube. So if you just search for that title on YouTube, you'll come straight to that. We've had a number of radio interviews, newspapers, and we've been given a series of talks, as I mentioned at the beginning. So we did our first one then in Ballysteen near Askeaton this time last year. And we had lots of people coming up. A lot of landowners came up to us and said, there's pillboxes on my land, and I know where there's another one. And then Tom and Paul O'Keefe from TI subsequently went out, and Ed Lyne as well, who's the resident archaeologist with Limerick, went out, met the landowners, and started recording these. And that's why we have so many now, which is fantastic. We've also been given talks at the Institute of Archaeologists of Ireland conference, which was in Galway back in April. I spoke at the TI conference, part of the Heritage Week in the Royal Irish Academy, to a room full of archaeologists. And the feedback has been consistently, fantastic. It's been positive. It's generated a huge amount of interest, which is really fantastic, because when you think of it, when I started in this business, 25 years ago, anything that dated to after 1700 wasn't considered to be archaeology. It was not of interest to anyone in our profession. I'm probably exaggerating, but I think that's a widely true statement. So the fact that we can talk to a whole group of archaeologists and then come up, including prehistoric archaeologists, prehistorians, finding these to be of such interest is brilliant. And through that engagement, the other thing we want to do in the engagement as well is to reach out to people who have family stories, family history, parents and grandparents who served in the LDF. That's how we have that photograph of Willie Horrigan as well. And we want to continue that over the next year.